Today is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. My name is Jeanette Pincus, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Debi Weiner, who I got to work with for a short time for me at Jewish Family Service. And this is part of our opportunity to do these interviews is Jewish Family Service is celebrating their 75th anniversary, and so many wonderful things this agency has done over the years, and how many changes as the community has needs have come across that this has been done. So Debi, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing what you did with the agency. And first, I'd like to ask you, how did you get started working with Jewish Family Service here in Dallas?
Well, I didn't know much about Jewish Family Service until my children were going to Akiva in school, and I was recruited to be a kosher home delivered meals volunteer. And that really was the first time I walked into the building was with Annette Walk. We were delivering meals together. And I remember being a little surprised. We were going down into the basement. It wasn't real fancy, little damp, but there was a very special vibe going on there. People were exceptionally friendly, very helpful, very delighted that we were there, and that thought stayed with me. I had been an at-home mom. And after I had been home with my children for about 11 years, it finally occurred to me it was time to go back to work. So when there was an opportunity at JFS, I decided to apply for the job, and I was not hired for the first job that I applied for. I'm a clinical social worker by training, and I applied for a job in clinical services. And I interviewed with Sherry Portwood, who really liked me and told me she really liked me, but because I had been out of the field for 11 years, she thought I wasn't a really good fit. But she shared information about me, and when there was an opening in what they called at that time the gerontology department, Bunny Radman called me and interviewed me, and we connected really well, and she was impressed with my skill level. And she said to me that even though I had not had any experience with older adults at that time, I had worked with children in my previous job. She said to me, I can't teach you the skills, but I can teach you about older adults. And so she kind of took a chance on me. I took a chance on the field. I had never worked with older adults before, so I didn't know how I would feel about it. And it turned out to be a beautiful match. I was actually hired to be a case manager, even though I was a clinical social worker. And after a while, it became apparent that I had some skills that the agency might be able to benefit from. We were providing case management at that time and some other services, but we weren't doing any counseling out of the gerontology department. Well, I started advocating for that because older adults are very much underserved when it comes to mental health services. And the main reason for that is that many of them are homebound, and they have no way of getting to a site where counseling is being offered. So my suggestion was we go into the home and we provide counseling where people are. And we started doing it with me, and from that day on, we had a very nice program providing older adult mental health services, and it turned into a pretty robust program.
When did you start working for JFS?
1991.
And so when you started doing this and then going more into the clinic, going in for more counseling with it, was it how long did that take before it got to develop into that?
That took a few years. I think they needed to get to know me and to see what I could do. And I was getting to know the field, and it simply became apparent to me that older adults were not being served. And, you know, if you look at what's going on across the country, there's been quite a bit of research that backs that up. That older adults are probably the most underserved population when it comes to mental health services. So I started doing that. In the year 2000, Bunny Radman stepped down, and she really mentored me. And it was a really beautiful relationship. She stepped down in 2000 from her position, although she stayed at JFS, and I was appointed coordinator of gerontology services. Several years later, we changed the name to be more current to older adult services. And several years after that, they changed the position from coordinator to director. And by the time I retired in 2021, I was senior director of older adult services.
When we're saying the senior adults, what age was that starting at?
That's a really good question, and I was asked that all the time. And what I learned is a number is just a number. A number doesn't mean all that much if the person doesn't have the skills and functions to go with it. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty much more about function than it is about age. There was a time when we said 55. There was a time when we said 60. There was a time when we said 65. But what we learned is that we needed to be flexible about the ages, because if a person is coping with multiple disabilities and they're younger, doesn't matter how old they are. They need the same services.
Debbie, when you came on, how many staff was in the gerontology area?
3. And I was the third.
Mm-hmm.
And several years later, it might have been you, Jeanette, that was hired to be the 4th.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true.
Yeah. What year did you start? Do you remember?
I would say probably late 80s that I came back on.
Okay.
Or early 90s, because I know I came back
I think it was the
several
early
times.
90s, because
Yeah.
when I first started, you weren't there.
Mm-hmm. And so the third person we're going to mention we mentioned Bunny, it was you, and
Louise Gold.
Yes.
And Louise Gold was probably there about as long or maybe even longer than I was.
She told me 35 years.
Okay. She was there longer than I was.
Yes, she was. You had mentioned that you had volunteered when Jewish Family Service was in the basement of Federation
Yes.
Building. And when you first were hired, did you get to go there too? Was that?
Yeah, I had an office in the basement.
Yes.
I had to share an office with Marilyn Darrow, who was doing the intake for Ahad Apartments at that time. And, by the way, the offices were totally cluttered. They were filled from floor to ceiling with meals. MRE meals from Desert Storm. Apparently, the agency had gotten this huge donation from the military for these meals. We had them a very long time. They lasted a long time, and they were difficult to give away because apparently they didn't taste very good. But so that was my introduction to Jewish Family Service. And I was actually there a year.
Yeah, what happened? I know
We were there a year.
the food bank was originally like a closet that was there, that we were getting cheese and maybe some other product from the government, that we had refrigerators there.
There were
Commodities was
yes.
the word that was used, yes. So when you came on, the food bank was growing.
It was growing, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm not positive about this, I think it had been moved to the JCC at some point for more room. But yes, that was definitely growing. And that's where the kosher home delivered meals were delivered to originally, and our volunteers would pick them up from the JCC and deliver them.
Because they were coming, Golden Acres was the one that was
Golden
cooking
Acres
the kosher
provided
meals.
the meals, and they delivered them to the JCC, and then the volunteers came to the JCC to pick them up. Several years later, when around the time the Golden Acres was sold and became Legacy, and then they moved, we needed to find a new meals provider, and we were able to get the JCC to agree, and that was another beautiful relationship that worked very well to this day.
How would you feel the goal was for the gerontology department?
Well, the goal was to help people maintain independent living for as long as is safely possible. So we had multiple services designed to help people do just that. And if at some point it was no longer safe or appropriate for those people to live independently, we would help them with the next step with referrals.
And how were we getting those clients?
Oh my goodness, all sorts of different ways. Sometimes people referred themselves, sometimes family members came to us, sometimes other agencies referred people to us. We did things that no one else did. There were very few agencies that were visiting people in the home, and certainly no agencies that were providing counseling in the home. So we provided a lot of unique services, and people could have as few or as many services as was appropriate for them. Many physicians referred people to us. So I did a lot of public speaking in the day, and one of the reasons that I did that public speaking was as a means of outreach, to try to inform people about what we did. We used to say that Jewish Family Service was the best kept secret in town because people just didn't know about us. And the more we could get the word out, and the more other professionals that we worked with, the more referrals that we got. And we never ever turned anybody away.
When you started, I know that we were definitely, it was for the Jewish community. As the years went on,
as the years went on, that changed. We learned that we needed to grow, and our services increased to meet the needs of the community. And we also had to change our funding streams because we had to look for other ways, an additional means of funding. And one of those things that we did was we applied for many grants. We applied for governmental grants, and that really encouraged us to expand our client base. We also expanded our funding by working with Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, and the like. So that really helped improve our funding stream as well.
I know as we had talked to each other before this started, you were part of the growth when it moved from the base from the Federation to when we went to Alpha and Coit.
Right.
So that, I imagine that's when the staff grew more. Also, that was also when we were getting more of the Russians that were coming in too, I guess, and we had that age population also coming in.
Right.
That, to mention, and I know you're going to be mentioning this to me too, but we also, there were many groups. I know we had Holocaust survivors. That was part, when you mentioned about the counseling too, that was definitely an issue. So I guess I'm going to let you go, so where you like to go first, because there were so many different needs, and that there were so many different programs that the agency was reaching out with that.
And you're probably going to hear me say this multiple times. One of the greatest strengths of Jewish Family Service has been our, and I say our even though I'm not working there anymore, but it's such a part of me. It's our ability to meet the needs of the communities as they are presented. And that has been true over and over and over again. So I mentioned that I started in the Federation building in the basement. After we were there, I was there a year. We moved to Coit and Alpha in a very nice office building that at the time we thought was really large. We outgrew it very, very quickly. So we were there for, I would say about 10, 15 years. In 2000, the agency purchased the Montgomery Ward Auto Center on Arapahoe, and we moved into that building. And we thought that was huge at the time. But we had no idea about the growth that would follow. So it really wasn't very long when we pretty much outgrew that building. Now, we only were using half of the building. The other half of the building we had rented out to Plaza Salons, and it was a wonderful opportunity for additional revenue for the agency. And after a while, I think it was about 2018, 2019, it became apparent we needed that space. So I believe the agency bought out the lease, and we ended up expanding JFS into the other part of the building. And so the older adult department actually had to move out in 2014 because there was simply not enough room for us. And we moved into an office building on Dallas Parkway, and we stayed there for about 6 years, and then we ended up moving back.
So how large was your staff then?
We had a staff of about 9 people.
Wow.
And we really, as needs grew, our staff grew as well, and, the services grew. And if you'd like, I'd like to share with you all of the different services that I ended up working with, because there's quite a lot of them,
Yes.
and I'm really proud of the breadth and depth of services we provided. So I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget anything. So I worked on intake. I worked on information and referral, where we answered questions from people in the community and provided resources.
So I guess a little bit, if we can go further about intake, because that was a shared thing. And
when
it's
I first
interesting.
started working
Yes.
there, everyone had some intake responsibilities. However, as our numbers grew and the number of intakes grew, it became more and more challenging for staff to spend time doing that along with everything else they had to do. So they eventually hired some people whose job exclusively was intake, and that really worked much, much better.
Okay.
Okay, so in addition,
Yes.
I worked on care management or case management, financial assistance, financial coaching, the counseling that I mentioned, and this was both older adult counseling as well as grief counseling.
Now, I think it's interesting about, you mentioned about trying to have these seniors as independent living as possible. And when you just mentioned about the financial, a little bit about what that entailed, about helping them, that was with their own financial bills.
There were like several different pieces to this. Some of the financial assistance was someone was unable to pay a bill. And they needed some assistance so that they weren't going to either get their electricity turned off or have to lose their home or lose their apartments, get evicted. At the same time, a program was started, and I don't remember the exact year, to provide financial coaching, and this was out of the Career and Employment Services Department. And one of the reasons, and I think it was brilliant actually, was they help people with the job search. But if someone did not know how to manage their finances, that wasn't enough. So they started a service to help people manage their money more effectively. And you're seeing this all over the country now. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. Okay, so to get back to the services that I worked on, kosher home delivered meals. In addition to counseling, as I just mentioned, I provided grief counseling.
And then with grief counseling, that was individual, and did you do group?
Groups and individual counseling, yes. I also, I worked on the kosher home delivered meals program, the transportation program, Holocaust services program, guardianship program, personal resource organizers program, and that's to help, that's similar to the financial assistance and financial coaching. It was helping people organize their paperwork and their bills a little more efficiently. The friendly visitor program, benefits counseling. We actually organized some Medicare D clinics when Medicare D was new. We had about 3 different clinics. Helped with Katrina, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. We had a homemaker I worked on the homemaker program. I had mentioned that I did outreach. There were the grief groups, the caregiver support groups, the indigent burial program. And then I had a supervisory role with the resettlement department, the food pantry, chaplaincy program, and safeguards for seniors.
And this is, I know, as the years have gone on, when you work in all these programs were coming on as the needs were being met. Okay. So mentioning going back, there's so many wonderful programs. A number of these you used volunteers. Which ones were those where they were trained in what they were doing to help out? I know like the Friendly Visitors. This is a wonderful program. These are people that could, were just like stuck in their homes.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And we actually, before I left, I believe it was in 2021, we actually revamped and refreshed the Friendly Visitor Program to make it more current, more relevant.
And what was done to do that?
Well, we worked with Yafa, who was our Holocaust Services director, and we decided to use that program with the Holocaust Services program, and it was a beautiful fit. And we just did a combination of, we really revamped the training and gave it a really, really robust educational piece to really equip our volunteers for helping the clients that we had at the time. And that worked out very well. And it's continuing to work out very well.
I'm trying to think the other service that you mentioned. What I've just found was so the clients that we received, a lot of times, as you mentioned, they weren't the ones doing the calling. A lot of times they were being referred by someone else. So the approach, even to contact these would be one of the challenges. And so I don't know if you want to, that was something that was a challenge many times.
It was a challenge, and it really required a lot of skill to not just to develop a relationship, but to get in the door. And it wasn't always easy, and sometimes people refused. And of course, we respected, we respected the dignity of individuals to have self-determination and make their own decisions. And if they insisted that they weren't interested in any of our services, so be it. But it took a lot of skill, and there was an art to it, as I'm sure you know, to call someone on the phone, explain who you were, and how they might want to meet with you and find out what other services we had available. Wasn't easy to do, didn't always work, but it did much of the time.
And I found it too, the referrals that we would get, these were many times individuals that a lot of times weren't connected to the Jewish community as much. They lived in the outskirts, not right with all of us, and getting that connection with them, I felt was so meaningful too.
You're right, it's vitally important. And, very often we would get referrals from people in the Jewish community that weren't actually connected in the community. And I have an interesting, comment about that. When we first started the Holocaust Services Program, we were given a number of Holocaust services in the community. Holocaust survivors in the community. Well, these were people that were known to community agencies. When I got that number, I thought that it might be quite a bit low. And I really felt that there were many more Holocaust survivors in the community that we just didn't know about, and perhaps didn't know about the services that we had available. One thing that we have learned is when we hired Yafa, who has tremendous energy, we obtained a grant for her services and to do additional outreach in the community for Holocaust survivors. And we learned that there were many, many more Holocaust survivors in the community than we were aware of, than anybody was aware of. Some of these were people who were not involved in the organized Jewish community. Some of them were Ukrainian survivors, as well as Russian survivors, who were not always recognized as being Holocaust survivors. However, if you know your history, and you know that the Jews in Ukraine suffered horribly in the Holocaust, just like all the other Eastern European Jews suffered. And when it comes to the Russian survivors, there were many Russian survivors that, to escape Hitler, who was marching towards Moscow, actually fled deeper into Russia. So according to the federal government and the Claims Conference, who provides funding for the Holocaust programs, survivors from Ukraine and from Russia, according to certain guidelines that they've provided, are actually Holocaust survivors. And so there are quite a few of them in the Dallas area that YAFA has been able to find. I'm very proud of that because these are people that really need our services and really benefit from them.
You also mentioned, I forgot what the title was of it, the burial. When people went indigent burial, which it was such a wonderful thing. I know that's developed over the years too, but how it first started.
Yes, I mean, that program existed on day one when I first came to Jewish Family Service. It's a very important program, very difficult and challenging for everyone concerned. These are people, family members at their most vulnerable, who unfortunately, have to go through an application process. And over the years, we've worked on making that as comfortable as we possibly can for the individuals. But it's such a meaningful and important program.
When it first happened, I remember it seemed like the three major, the synagogues and temple would take turns.
There was a rotation.
That there was a rotation for that, and then the development happened more. I know we hired Rabbi Walk. I don't know.
Yes.
And so that was a development that happened. How did that?
Well, for many years, when it came to the indigent burial program, we had to locate a rabbi to officiate at the service. And at one time, we used a rotation of rabbis. The rabbis were very well-meaning, and I worked with almost every rabbi in Dallas, but it really didn't work out that well. Furthermore, approximately half the Jewish population in Dallas is unaffiliated. So there was really no way for them to really meet their needs Jewishly. So we really needed a chaplaincy program. And actually, Rabbi Walk was one of the people that recognized that need when he was the rabbi over at Sha'arei Tefillah. And we talked about it for many years. Nothing happened. And then some money was raised, some seed money, to start the position. And once we had the rabbi, who is Rabbi Walk, in place, he performed he officiated at the indigent burials. And that was tremendously helpful for not just us and our clients, but the rabbinical community as well, because they really needed to meet the needs of their congregation and didn't always have the time available to officiate at these funerals.
Debbie, I also want to mention back the support groups that you did. I mean, they were continuous over all these years, and I think I remember my mother attending one when my father passed away. That was extremely helpful for her. And any of these support groups, it's like, it was one thing being with your family, but it's much better when you're with other people at the time that you can share these things with. So I want to just make sure we get a little more credit for that, because that was something that you really was involved with quite a bit, and did so many that I want to have you share a little bit about that.
Sure. Actually, Rabbi Deborah Robbins contacted Michael Fleischer many years ago. It was in the early 1990s, and was encouraging us to come up with some grief support groups that everyone in the Jewish community could attend. Now, at that time and at this time, there's occasional grief support groups that some of the congregations do put on from time to time, but there wasn't a lot of consistency. And not everyone belongs to a congregation. And sometimes, the Jewish community in Dallas is a little siloed. And sometimes someone is willing to go to a grief support group at one synagogue, but not another. So we wanted to have a neutral place where everyone could feel comfortable. So, I came up with a 6-week grief support group series that is still being run by Deborah Lehmansberger. And we had been offering those grief support groups, sometimes in different congregations, sometimes at Jewish Family Service. I think we may have even offered them at the JCC at one time, but we tried to offer them all over the community so people could take advantage of them who wanted to. And after a while, people had asked for more. And, sometimes people would go through a 6-week grief support group series and think, well, I could still use more support. So at that time, we started a monthly grief support group for individuals that just wanted a little extra amount of support.
And how about the caregiver support group? Because goodness knows that's hard on.
Yes, and the caregiver support group, we have been running that, I would say probably at least 15, maybe 20 years. And we've had multiple groups in different locations at various times. When it comes to support groups tend to kind of wane at some times, and other times they blossom, and it just kind of depends. So sometimes these support groups don't have a lot of participants, sometimes they have a lot of participants. But when someone needs one, they need it now. And so we offer them even when the attendance isn't great, just to meet the needs of the people who need them, because I've found that even if one person attends and that one person gets their needs met, that's a lot.
I want to also, and we've gone through a lot, so I just wanted to review some things with that. Mention, I know as you were talking about different programs, that changes did occur and the agency went with it, and that's why your list was getting really long. Is there anybody, I'm sure that we mentioned volunteers. Was there certain committees that you had, lay people that you also worked with that you want to mention?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to check my list again,
Okay.
because I don't want to let anyone out. But I have a list of different lay people that I worked with over the years who were tremendously helpful, some of them who are no longer with us. And so I'm going to go through my list now. Beverly Tobian, Renee Stanley, Walter Levy, Charlotte Weberman, Bud Litwin, Maggie First, Marty Scher, Irma Freudenreich, Edith Molnar, Rudy Baum, Myrna Reese, Harriet Gross, and Pat Pizer. And then I'd also like to share, there were other professionals that helped us tremendously. Sometimes someone will come and they might need a dentist, or they might need a doctor, and maybe they don't have insurance or they didn't have the funds. And there were people in the community that out of the goodness of their heart helped us. So I just like to share some of those people that worked with us as well. Dr. Saul Lurie, Dr. Gary Solomon, Michael Cohen the attorney, Dr. Paul Chaffetz, Dr. Jeffrey Glass, and many, many community rabbis.
Okay, thanks for that. We also were talking, when I was asking you about challenges and highlights, you said that was they go together. So I wanted you to share that with us.
Okay, and there's really two situations that I want to that anyone who was involved in our efforts during Hurricane Katrina will ever forget it. So I'll go back to the beginning of that. Right after the hurricane, we knew that so many of the people in New Orleans needed a great deal of help and had to leave New Orleans, at least temporarily. So we were actually contacted by the North Texas Food Bank to serve as a distribution site for goods that we would be able to provide to survivors of the hurricane who were coming to Dallas. And we knew that there were quite a few of them were coming. So I'll always remember this. Janine Pullman put out the word one afternoon, it was either the day or the next day after the hurricane, that we needed donations. The next morning, we came to Jewish Family Service, and the parking lot was filled with people, and I still get chills thinking about it, who were donating goods. And the beautiful thing about that is that people came to donate, but then they stayed to volunteer and help. We had so much that we had to transform the JFS building into a warehouse. And I remember we had the shoe room. We had one office that had nothing but shoes in it. And then we had the linen room. And we had, the children's clothing room. And we had the pajama room. And we just wanted to make sure that these people who had lost everything had the dignity of decent things to wear and a decent place to sleep. So it was just an incredible experience. We saw thousands of people during a 3-week period. The staff all took their time and they worked so hard. We used to have to look after each other, remind people to take a break because we just went from one person to the next. And we treated them with kindness and empathy and compassion. And people came and they worked on weekends, they worked evenings, they worked holidays, not because they were asked, but because they wanted to do it. And it's something that I will never forget and something that I will always remember. And I think, frankly, it put Jewish Family Service on the map because we were one of the first agencies to organize ourselves in order to be able to accept all of these survivors and help them. And I'd also like to give some credit to Michael Fleischer because when the survivors came to Dallas, they were staying in shelters, most of them, down in downtown Dallas. Well, we were on Arapahoe. Many of them had cars and could drive us, but they needed to know about us and know we were there. So he actually went to all of the shelters where people were staying from Hurricane Katrina. He printed out a flyer that talked about Jewish Family Service, where we were and what we could offer them. And he took the time to talk to people, to gain their trust and convince them to come. And that's why they came to us. So that was the first challenge, and I think it's a highlight because it showed us what we were capable of. No one thought we could do what we did. We didn't think we could do what we did, but we did it. And then the second great challenge was with the pandemic, with COVID. During that time, we couldn't meet with people one-on-one or face-to-face, and yet people needed services. The older adults needed services. We had to figure out a way to meet their needs, which was getting to be pretty desperate. So we took a look at what other organizations were doing across the country. We noticed that there were some agencies, a handful, that were having some good success utilizing technology with older adults. Well, the term older adults and technology don't really go together too well. And we were operating on the assumption, just like everybody else, that older adults really couldn't use technology and didn't want to. That part might be true. Sometimes there was a bit of resistance, but we thought to ourselves, what if we can help people utilize cell phones, utilize tablets, utilize computers in a way that they didn't think they could do before? What if we had Zoom meetings or utilized other kinds of telehealth services that we could provide? We ended up having a little bit of resistance from the families who didn't think that their family members were capable, but we utilized volunteers to help. We helped them. We were able to obtain some very user-friendly equipment for people, and we discovered that our assumptions were wrong. We even had a 101-year-old lady using a tablet. We learned that everyone is capable of learning, no matter their age, no matter their abilities. Everyone can learn new things. So we changed our whole model of providing services. Quite frankly, older adult services will never be the same. Yes, I'm very proud of that too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. thank you. Is there, as I'm going through my list, I feel like I've covered my questions, but I know you have some more.
I do, because you
Okay.
had asked me a few things when we were talking
Yes.
about this. And I wanted to talk a little about all the other organizations that I was able to work with that helped us. And I wrote some of those down
Okay.
too, because I
Okay.
didn't want to forget. Of course, we worked with the JCC in their meals program and in their senior adult program as well. I worked with many staff members of the Federation. I worked with Lisa Brodsky over at High. At Golden Acres, I had the opportunity to work with Marion Pearl. Marion Pearl, for those who don't know her, was the first director of social service at Golden Acres and was actually the very first social worker hired by Jewish Family Service somewhere around 1950 or maybe even earlier than that. I worked with the Dallas Holocaust Museum. I worked with the JFS in Fort Worth. I've worked with Dallas Jewish Funerals, Sparkman Hillcrest, City of Plano staff, City of Dallas staff, Alpha Omega Dental Fraternity, especially Dr. Howard Kessner, the Claims Conference, who funds the Holocaust programs, Adult Protective Service, Catholic Charities, and probably many more that I haven't even been able to even remember over the years. But I also want to mention the people at JFS that I've worked with over the years, because I've really been privileged to work with so many people. So let's see if I can find my page. Well, of course, I worked with Bunny Radman. I worked with Sherry Portwood.
Benny, you mentioned was the director of the gerontology department. Sherry Portwood was the director of the clinical services.
Yes, for many, many, many years, and was tremendously helpful. I worked with Arnie Marks. He was the director of Jewish Family Service when I first came to work for Jewish Family Service. I worked with Michael Fleischer, of course, for the entire time that he was at JFS. I worked with Louise Gold, who was tremendously helpful to me. Ariella Goldstein, who I worked with, really partnering as we were, she was director of clinical department, I was director of older adult services. I got to work with Sue Saya, I got to work with Janine Pullman, I got to work with Rena Silverberg. Rena was actually our interim director in the year between Arnie Marks and Michael Fleischer. I worked with Steve Banta, who was the director after Michael Fleischer, and Kathy Barker, of course. And the other person that I can't leave out would be Rabbi Wolk. I've worked very closely with him in the chaplaincy department.
They're all wonderful people. I know everybody's heart, when I've been talking to everyone, y'all's eyes, it's just you could tell this was so much a part of your life and the work that you did, and that your families were also involved, because it took up so much of your time, because it just was not a 9-to-5 job.
No, but then the families got into it
Yes,
as well.
yeah.
I remember during Hurricane Katrina when suddenly there was there was a need for socks, and we didn't have enough donations, and we didn't have enough socks. So my husband and I went to Costco and took a huge shopping cart and filled it as full as we possibly could with socks. And I also recruited him to help with the Medicare D clinics.
Tell us a little more of the Medicare D clinics. What was involved with that?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but when Medicare D started, and that's the medication portion of Medicare, it was so confusing that nobody understood what it was and how to apply for it. And I'm talking physicians, I'm talking pharmacists that would call us and say, I don't know how to help these people. So we decided, since there was a need, that we were going to do that. So we recruited some volunteers, including my husband, and we taught them how to enroll someone on Medicare D and how to work with people. And we took 3 Sundays where we invited people from the community to come in on a walk-in basis, and we would help enroll them into Medicare D. And that's what we did. It was a wonderful response. We helped quite a few people. And as the years went on and people got more familiar with the program, it got a little bit easier. And then there was some pharmacies provided some assistance as they got a little more comfortable, and even some physicians and families took over.
That's a wonderful thing. Going back through, is there anything else that you would like to share?
Well, you asked me, what does Jewish Family Service mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about that a lot, and I just wanted to share what it means. First of all, Jewish Family Service is founded on Jewish values, especially the values of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. It's an open door in need. We welcome everyone at Jewish Family Service. We don't turn people away. We have dedicated, skilled people who really care about helping. And I'm very proud to be a part of Jewish Family Service. It was a very important part of my life. I used to get up in the morning excited to go to work. I used to feel like it was a privilege because I got to make a difference. And who gets to say that anymore? I got to say that. So I'm very, very proud of the organization. I know that whatever challenges they have will become highlights, just like they did when I was there.
Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience of working with Jewish Family Service and all the wonderful things that you did with them. I know that they were blessed to have you too, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.